Well, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well.
Good.
Thanks. Hello.
Well,
Hello.
welcome to everybody joining us on the Singer Facebook channel for this special Facebook Live with Patrick Grant. I was working out how to describe you. I was thinking
I don't know, just a nice fella. How about
That'll do. So we're going to chat about a few things this morning. Sewing bee, your day job or jobs, and then we have a few questions from people in the Singer community that we're going to chat through. Tell us about the most recent series of Sewing Bee. It seems like it was really successful.
It went fantastically well. I think we had the biggest audience we've ever had. The channel are really super pleased. We're doing another one already. I think we're still looking for contestants. So please apply. It's actually fantastic fun, and we're really nice.
Would you ever do it?
Would I ever do it? Of course I can't do it.
No.
That's fantastic, Patrick. You've done incredibly well.
In another life.
I think people are put off because they think they can't sew under the time pressure, and we understand that. But nobody who enters Sewing Bee has ever sat down and done stopwatch sewing before. They all manage it, and we have sewers of all different abilities who enter, and it's hard for sure, and it's kind of stressful, but it's also incredible fun. Everybody that takes part loves it. I think in all of the seasons, we've done 5 seasons now, without exception, everybody has had a fantastic time, and the standard has continued to get better because we get more and more people applying. I think there are probably thousands of people at home who are every bit as good as the sewers that we had on the competition this year, who just aren't quite brave enough to do it. So please just put your application in and have a go, because it is really fun, and
for the people who win, it can actually be quite life-changing.
Well, I think even for those people that don't win, it can be and has been. And I think what is always really wonderful is the stories of sort of self-discovery that come with this. I mean, I think Juliet this year, it was such an overwhelmingly positive and touching moment when she won, and all this kind of emotion came pouring out of her. And she said at the end, "Look, this is the first time I've ever won." It changes you in ways. It's not that everybody wants to go off and become a star in the sewing world, or open a haberdashery, or put their name on a sewing machine, or do whatever it is. But it is just it's just a lovely thing to be recognised for being fantastic at something that you just have always done in the private of your own home. And so please, last year we had, I think, over 1,500 applications, which was the most we've ever had. It'd be nice to have more this year. I mean, I do meet lots of people who say, "Oh yeah, I do a lot of sewing, but I never do the show because it looks nerve-wracking." But
the quality seemed to be higher this year, and yet the challenges also seem to be tougher.
We have continued to make the challenges harder. I mean, I think we started, when I think back to what we did in the first series, I think the first challenge was an A-line skirt with a button. I mean, I can't remember exactly what it was. First challenge on this series was a wiggle dress, and that's obviously it's a huge leap on, but we expect everybody now knows what they're going to get. And we now expect people to be able to sew. Firstly, to sew all sorts of different fabrics. So sew wovens, sew jersey, sew stretch fabrics, sew slippery technical fabrics, sew lightweight silks. So we expect them to be able to sew with everything that you might be given: heavyweight wools, lightweight cottons, heavyweight cottons, denims. You've got to be able to do all of that. But also, we expect people to have some knowledge of all sorts of different machines. So they need to be able to use, straightforward flatbed lock stitch machine. They need to be able to use an overlocker. We've had cover stitch machines. We've had flat locks. We expect, and of course, we give you a little bit of help. If you've never used one of these machines, you get a little tutorial before you start. We're not throwing you in at the deep end. We're not there to make anyone look or feel bad. So we'll help you. So actually, for many people, it's like going to someone's going to sewing school. But all the contestants, as you see on screen, there is an enormous amount of help they give each other. So, but yes, we've made them more difficult. But everybody comes. I think everybody knows that we have this, this transformation challenge. So people have a sort of library in their head of, if I get this kind of fabric, I know I can probably rustle up a sheared girl's dress, or I can make a pair of dungarees, or I can cut a pair of shorts, or do, there are certain people will have a kind of library in their head of things. You're like, how did you think? Well, you must have kind of planned it. But of course it gets more difficult. I think the same way, Bake Off, now you're like, it's obscure cake from the Bavarian Highlands that nobody's ever heard of. We want to continue because, I think what we've seen over the last 6 years is that more and more people are sewing, more and more people have sewing machines, more and more people are buying more advanced sewing machines and different kinds of machines. And, generally the sewing community in the UK is getting really, really good.
The sewing community in the UK seems there's a massive residual enthusiasm for Sewing Bee. And I know when it was announced that it was coming back, we saw on our social channels just the level of excitement that people had knowing that it was coming back. Do you pick that up?
Well, we were really excited that it was coming back. I mean, we'd sort of, there was all this stuff in the press, it's been cancelled. It had never been cancelled. It was just in conversation for a very long time. And, it had got to the point where, we'd gone through a couple of years without one. But, there were still conversations ongoing in the back. And we all had to keep quiet. We couldn't say, no, it hasn't been cancelled. We're still sort of, there's chats going on in the background. But yeah, I think, again, we saw the highest number of applicants for this series. There was a huge kind of residual kind of outpouring of love when it was announced that the show was coming back. And we've seen so much positive reaction before, and I mean the engagement on social media for this series was extraordinary. I mean, I have a handful of followers on Twitter, but I was posting things and they were getting thousands of likes, and that never happens to me before because none of my stuff is that interesting, frankly. But it brings people together in a way that very few shows do. And even the Daily Mail had nothing but positive things to say about the show. Well, the Daily Mail, at times find a way of finding the negative spin on things. But, they gave us 5 stars and said, we are I think they described it as the kindest show on television. And I think there is a real warmth to it. And I think that warmth reflects the way the kind of sewing community is. I think these are lovely people doing something they love for no other reason than that they enjoy doing it and they enjoy what they make. And and I think that kind of positivity pervades. When I think about the difference between something like baking and cooking, which most people do at home, alone in their kitchen, whereas a lot of people sew in groups with their friends or with their sewing classes who become their friends. And the point is, it's called a sewing bee. A sewing bee was it was a group coming together to sew together. And, again, especially I think because, the overriding, climate in this country has been one of fairly sizable division. Sewing Bee was a sort of, an oasis of community and it was very warm and very collective, and it felt like a lovely antidote to all the bad stuff that was happening.
I think one thing I noticed, possibly with this series more than the others, is it showed up the diversity within the sewing community, that it regardless of age, gender or whatever, it's something that a lot of people are involved in and enjoy.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. I think it's sometimes you see we do look at social media and we don't always respond to it. But certainly while the show is going out, we're Joe, Esme, and I are all looking and talking to each other and sharing funny stuff that people do and say. My brother-in-law is obsessed with sending me the most ridiculous things that people are saying. But there is a definite sort of it is a very diverse community. We had our youngest winner this year. Juliet was our youngest winner. I didn't know that at the time, but in fact I didn't know that until I watched the show go out. Like, oh wow. But there were various people saying, "Oh, it's really unfair. Why are all the older ladies are being kicked off? It's very ageist." And I said, "Well, our first winner was 82. I mean, I think of all the shows you could level that accusation at, it's not us, because that is, there are." It's funny, even at Norton's, we have tailors who works into their 70s. In fact, we had a tailor when I first started there, who was in his 80s, who was still a Savile Row tailor. He was still making clothes for us every week. He would only come in one day a week, but it is something that you can do well into old age, and it's also something that loads of kids get into. I mean, I get stories, get sent pictures of things via social media of project. There was something that a lady posted on Twitter that was, her 9-year-old son had made this dress for him. I'm like, oh my God, it's fantastic. I mean, we should be doing a kids sewing bee, because a lot of kids do it. And I run I have to stop saying that. I am the co-chairman of an organisation that's part of the Prince's Foundation called Future Textiles. And Future Textiles was set up in Dumfries House, which Prince Charles bought in Ayrshire. It was this fantastic Robert Adam built house with all this amazing Chippendale furniture. And they had this beautiful attic, and they didn't know what to do in the attic. He bought the house to save it from being sort of split up and the furniture sold off. But they didn't know what to do with the attic, and one of the chaps who runs the estate, he was a sewing bee fan, and he said, "Oh, why don't we do something?" Because that area of Ayrshire had been a big textiles area in the past, lots of big garment manufacturing businesses, there were textile factories, and so he thought, well, it would be really nice to try and sort of help, rebuild some of that, and just also link what we do today to what has happened in the past. So they set up a sewing school in the attic, and we have had over 4,000 school kids from Ayrshire through the programmes that we do there, and we do it for 12 to 18-year-olds, and they are very competent, and it is a very inclusive thing, and I think it's a thing. I mean, it's a wonderful day out for those school kids, many of whom are from very deprived areas. They get to come to the estate, which is beautiful, and they get to walk up the back stairs where Prince Charles lives, and past the floor where his bedroom is, and up to the attic. I mean, in the real house, and they have this wonderful experience. And I think it is it's very meditative, it's very mindful. I think it's really, really good for kids. I think we've removed a lot of arts and crafts and tech and woodwork and things from the curriculum. And I think particularly, I think it's a very, very useful thing. I think it's a fantastic part of children's education to make things with your hands, and sewing is a very forgiving and fulfilling way of doing that.
You mentioned Joe Lycett a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
New host for the show.
Yeah.
What difference do you think he brought to the programme?
Well, he's a very different character from Claudia. I mean, Claudia I love. Claudia is a fantastic, is an amazing person, and we're very good friends. And but Joe I love to bits. He is. I mean, they're similar in some ways. They're both slightly daft. They're both very bright. They're both very jolly, and but I don't know. I mean, it was a joy to work with Joe. He brought a new energy to the sewing room. Esme and I and Joe get on very well. We see each other quite a lot socially. Actually, we did an exhibition of Joe's paintings, Joe and Joe's mum's paintings at Norton and Sons, which we launched a couple of weeks ago, actually. So yeah, we see each other a lot. I mean, I think he was a fantastic choice. Hard to think of a better choice, and I think he lifts the spirits of the contestants in a wonderful way. He says some very brilliant and he has Esme and I in stitches. He says the funniest things. He doesn't know a thing about sewing, but yeah, he was great, and we already have a schedule for filming the next series, so I'm really looking forward to seeing more of him. I think he's in Australia at the moment. He's touring his stand-up over there at the moment.
So what's a typical day like filming on the Sewing Bee? It's
a pretty long day. It is tiring. Not for me, but it's tiring for the contestants. I do nothing. We start fairly early in the morning. It is as you see it on TV. The order in which we do the challenges, absolutely everything is as you see it. The timings are absolutely real. But we're normally. I get on set a little bit later than Esme because she needs to have her hair straightened. I think we're normally on set about 6:30 in the morning, and we normally get away by about 7:30. I mean, obviously earlier in the season when there are more contestants, we've got more judging. Each challenge. What you don't see on telly is that we say quite a lot about every garment, and then that is usually edited to half a sentence from me, half a sentence from Esme in the beginning. Obviously, you get more of it as the series goes on, but that process is quite takes quite a long time. We obviously film 2 days back to back as it's broadcast. We filmed it in the middle of it was incredible. The first day it was so hot. In fact, I think I had one of these. I had a couple of lightweight jackets with me to wear, and we walk on to start the thing. All the contestants are there. It's the first episode. Cameras are rolling. Joe calls Esme and I in, and I walk in, and all the cameramen are muttering, and I can see that something's wrong, and then they're like, we're just going to have to do that again, your jacket is strobing. So 2 or 3 jackets I tried, they all strobed on camera, and I had to end up wearing a tweed jacket. I think it was 38 degrees on set inside. We had an air conditioning unit the size of a truck, and various other, and it was still it was baking. But so there it's hard. It's hard work, the long days, but it's really, it is really, really fun. We get breaks. We have everyone gets a proper lunch break. No one stopped from going to the loo. But it's a fun atmosphere on set. Most of the crew we've worked with for years and years. The camera operators, the jib, the team that do the sound. We're a big family. Most of the producers have been doing it since the beginning, or many of the producers have been doing it since the beginning. It's jolly. We're in a fantastic warehouse building in Bermondsey. We get this amazing view over Tower Bridge out the windows. It is a lot of fun on set.
So take me back to before you first became involved in Sewing Bee. How did that come about? What were you doing at that time, and how did that come to be?
Actually, I don't really know. I was working at the time. When did we do Sewing Bee? I can't remember. How many 6 years? What year was it? 2011, 12? Does anybody know? I was running Norton & Sons. I was running eTorts. I think I'd already started doing Hammond & Co. for Debenham, so I was already fairly busy. In fact, I was just about to start. I'd been working on Hammond & Co. for about a year, and it was going to launch 6 months later when we filmed the first one. Because I remember thinking that it might be quite useful. People might know who I am when they go to Debenhams. I had been involved in 2 documentary series for the BBC. I'd been part of a series about Savile Row that was made on BBC 4, which was fascinating and really, really successful for BBC 4. I think it went out on BBC 4 a couple of times, then it went to BBC 2, back on 4 a couple of times, back on 2. It was on British Airways. You would watch it on the seat back on British Airways. And in that series, I'd gone to Harris and Lewis to source some tweeds for Norton & Sons. And we just happened to arrive the day after the takeover of the biggest mill on Harris had been announced by this chap called William Haggis. And he had this plan of, reducing it all down to just a couple of tweeds and industrialising it. And sort of all hell had broken loose on the island. And there was this fascinating story about to unravel. And lots of people got in touch with me at Norton's, the letters and emails and phone calls, people just walking in, what's happening on Harris? I'm like, I don't really know. So I got in touch with the BBC and said, look, I think there's a lot of interest in this Harris Tweed story. I mean, there's always interest in Harris Tweed anyway, because it's such an amazing textile and such an amazing production story. So they did a 3-part series again for BBC 4 about Harris Tweed that I was involved with. And the lady that commissioned both of those series for BBC 4 was the lady that commissioned Sewing Bee. So I don't know this for sure, but I have a feeling that she said, well, maybe here's somebody that might be worth having a look at. But I screen tested with a bunch of different people. And in the end, actually right at the last minute, screen tested with May, and she and I got the job.
And the rest, as they say.
And the rest, as they say, is Sewing Bee history.
Now I know everybody knows that you're very fond of your clothes. So tell us, what's the favourite piece of clothing that you own?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I have some lovely old things. I have a dinner suit that was my dad's, and he must have got it either from a relative or he must have bought it second hand, because it was made in the 1930s.
Wow! I
actually have 3. I have his morning suit, his evening tails, and his dinner suit, and all 3 were made in the 30s. I think the dinner suit was made in maybe 1934 by a firm called Thompson's Bespoke Tailors in Edinburgh, and I don't wear it so much anymore because it's about. I mean, it must be about 20 ounce kind of wool Barathea, but it is absolutely bomb-proof. And, I wore it as a teenager, I wore it through university, I wore it again as a postgrad. It's the most sort of, hardest wearing, sort of indestructible dinner suit. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful silk shawl collar. I've got 3 waistcoats for it. A Barathea one that matches the wool. I think there's a silk one and something else. But it's just the fact that it was my father's, and I've photographs of him wearing it. I know that he probably had a ridiculous riotous time wearing it. I know I've had I mean, this is a nice thing about clothes. They sort of they become storied. They're part of the part of the way you live through things. They go on adventures with you, and they develop stories. They become filled with memories, and in the way that, and I think that's the great thing about sewing. I think a lot of people make clothes for their children, and these become very cherished items. I mean, people don't keep the things they cook, but people keep the things that they sew. And they remember times that they've worn them, and they become very special
and associated with particular memories.
Absolutely, in particular people and times and places, and I can picture times that I've worn this, and there's one that pops into my head right now that I can't talk about. But it's they become sort of filled with memories, and I think that's one of the reasons people really cherish clothing in a way, or they used to, because obviously so much of clothing now is kind of throwaway, and I think it would be really, really sad if we went so far down that road that all clothes became so poor quality that they just didn't last. I mean, I think my wardrobe is full of stuff that's old. I love wearing I love wearing things that I've had for years and years and years, and I'm not interested in newness at all. I'm just interested in lovely things that get better with age. And
that leads us nicely, and we were asking people on the Singer Facebook group to send us in some questions for you, and actually that links into an interesting one that Judy sent in. She wanted to hear your views on sustainability and what you thought about the idea that maybe if everyone changes something, it would achieve more than if a few people change everything.
That's a very good question, and it is something that I'm at. Again, this series of Sewing Bee, we had the Reduce, Reuse, Recycle episode that I think of all the episodes, the engagement with the audience was enormous. I mean, this is such a huge and such an important topic to us that, you know, I could spend 10 hours. I did a TED talk all about this last year. I spend a lot of time talking to universities. I do a lot of talks about this. I mean, it's hard to, you know, I don't, it's such an important thing. We really, really, really need to change the way we think about clothes. Everybody needs to change the way they think, or almost everybody needs to change the way they think about clothes, because the system that, you know, the clothing production system that we have is running away to this awful place. And there's, you know, and I don't want to go on and on about all the badness, but, you know, there are things that people can do. I think I'm trying to remember a statistic that I heard. If every person wore their clothes, you know, one more time, it would reduce the amount. I mean, there's some statistic about, you know, how just a very small change to the way we think about clothes and the way we use them has an absolutely astonishingly large change. I mean, at the moment, the fashion industry is argued to be one of the greatest polluters on the planet. I mean, people say that it is the second worst polluter on the planet. You know, we know that it consumes extraordinary amounts of oil. The 26 billion litres of oil were used by the fashion industry last year, both in the production of clothing, obviously now 70% of which is plastic, and the transport of clothing from, you know, very cheap labour countries to the places where it's used, which are very far away. It's a huge polluter. Whatever metric you use, it's a huge polluter. And something like 8-9% of all the world's greenhouse gases come from the production of clothing, fashion. And, you know, and that is appalling. You know, I did a talk at the Royal Geographical Society a couple of, I'd say actually months ago now, and sitting on my right was a lady from the Carbon Trust, and they reckon that if we're going to meet the global UN targets for carbon emissions, the fashion industry needs to reduce its carbon output by 90%.
Wow.
Which is an extraordinary amount.
Yeah.
So we can all do simple things. We can all do really simple things that change that quite dramatically. We all just need to stop being obsessed by buying new clothes. We need to keep our clothes and wear them for longer. That's the simple answer. Buy less stuff, keep the things you have for longer. And that means doing things like repairing them, which again, I think home sewers would think nothing of popping a button back on a shirt, re-hemming a pair of trousers when the hem falls down, doing simple repairs, and also altering things. You know, you can change the look of something quite simply.
Leah wants to know on that kind of line, she wants to know if you had any tips for getting a professional finish. She says no matter what home sewers do, you can always tell a garment's homemade. Is it something to do with the fabrics they choose, or the quality of the patterns, or the quality of the interfacings?
Well, I don't agree with that. I think, you know, I work in a shop on Savile Row with, you know, they're all mortal humans. They're just people that have done a lot of it. You know, when you learn to be a coat maker on Savile Row, you know, it normally takes you 4 years, and that's 40 hours a week, 48 weeks for 45 weeks a year, whatever it is, for 4 years. That's a lot of sewing. You know, they're doing an awful lot of it, but it's not magic. You know, on Savile Row we have one type of machine. You know, our coat makers on Savile Row have an iron, and they have a flatbed lock stitch machine, and that's it. We have big long stitch, short stitch. That's it. There is no, like, it does one stitch, and they make this with that. You know, there's a bit, you know, obviously there's hand sewing involved. It just takes practice, but I think there's no magic formula to it. You know, yes, we use fantastic fabrics, but a lot of professional sewing, you know, if you go to the cheap end of the high street, those fabrics are garbage. I think everyone can achieve that finish. I think, you know, Esme and I both go on about it on set, and it doesn't make, you know, not a lot of it makes the edit. Underpressing things, pressing things beautifully. I think, you know, managing your fabrics as you're making them so that they're not getting scrumpled up in heaps, keeping everything, you know, when you look at our tailors on Savile Row, you know, their boards are incredibly neat and tidy, everything is laid flat in pieces, nothing is screwed up and held in the corner. You know, just take care and take time and be precise, make sure your shears are sharp, make sure you've got a good quality sewing machine. There is no magic formula. I think everybody can sew to the standard that our guys sew to. They maybe just can't sew as quickly as they can.
Kind of on that line, Sue wanted to know how the contestants on the show finish their seams. Do any of them cut corners to save time and use their pinking shears, or is that off limits?
How do they finish their seams? Quickly is the answer. Hurriedly, because it's normally, things are normally happening under time pressure. I mean, there are lots of great ways. I mean, my mum was a big pinker. I think pinking shears are perfectly fine. I mean, they finish them in all sorts of ways. There's an awful lot of overlocking. I mean, even on Savile Row, we use, our trouser makers on Savile Row will overlock the inside, will overlock the edges on the inside seams. So I think an overlocker, you've got to finish a seam somehow. They will bind seams on the show. I mean, you can see most of it. I mean, and because of the time, it's only an hour program, you don't get Esme and I laboriously scrutinising every seam, which we do, much to the displeasure of some of the contestants. But all the normal ways. There's some of them will hand finish hems. Again, I think a lot of them will use the machine just to finish things quickly. But again, I think there's no kind of magic here. Like, all the techniques that are out there, everybody knows what they are.
Cool.
And they're all valid. I think just make sure that you finish it. Don't just leave it ragged.
Final couple of questions from the Facebook group. Vicky, what's your advice for cutting out a pattern accurately?
Well, I was taught to cut out the Savile Row tailored way, which is, we have a stiff paper pattern. We lay out our cloth and we lay the patterns on the cloth and we work out the lay, and we we line everything up, and we use pattern weights, quite heavy. We've got sort of quite big, heavy, square, rectangular brass weights. And I, was taught to mark round with a chalk. So we mark everything on the cloth, on the double. We mark everything round. Then we mark all the inlays, and we add all the inlays, and then it's cut out with shears. That's the way I was taught to do it. Almost nobody on Sewing Bee does it that way. Home sewers, I think, most people are using paper patterns that are thinner, that you can't do this with. But I think you can mark around a paper pattern with chalk. That's how I was taught to do it. I think there are lots of valid ways of doing it. But I think simple things like making sure you always iron your pattern first, so it's completely flat before it goes down on the fabric. Making sure that it's very carefully pinned. I wouldn't use, if I'm marking out on a pattern and I start and I move, it's fine because I've got a chalk mark and I can put it back to where the chalk is and keep going around it. If you've got pattern weights and you're cutting with a rotary cutter and you've got no mark on it and the pattern shifts, you're done for. So I would always pin those patterns so that they're absolutely perfectly held in place, and just take time. I think people tend to rush cutting out because they want to get onto the making, but once you've cut it, if you've cut it inaccurately, it's done for at that point. So just be completely accurate at that point.
Last question from Lisbeth. Scariest thing to do is to make little cuts in seams to make the garment fit better, like around the neck. Is there anywhere you should never do that?
Well, I'm not a great dressmaker, so this question slightly flummoxed me. But we, at work, obviously we toile everything before we do it. So and we will have, and at Savile Row we don't do that. So when we're doing ready to wear, we toile everything, we fit it on the model. We always calico toile it first, then we remark the pattern, and then we cut it out, and that's how we do it. At Savile Row, obviously, we based everything in place, we put it on, and we adjust it before we sew it for real. If you have the luxury of being able to do that, that is the way to get that fit. So you're only chopping into a bit of calico, or you're not chopping into it at all. You get it to fit right, and then you sew it up.
Cool. Just before we finish, most people will know, or I hope most people will know, that we are once again doing a little promotion with you, so people have the chance to
come here
and take part.
Admire the tapestries. Take part in Day's Sewing.
Yeah, which is fun and informal.
It is fun.
And very relaxed. Could you just tell everybody, because there's still time for people to get involved, how long they've got to apply and where they need to go to find out all the details?
Well, you have until the 31st of May to enter. So that is another week, is it, roughly? No, another month and a week. 31st of May. It's my birthday next week. I should know this. May 31st. I'm going to do that. Yeah. You have until May the 31st. So you've got about 5 weeks to enter. And for full details of how to do that, go to www.singerco.co.uk/Patrick.
So with that, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for watching.
Good to see you.
Hopefully see you here for a day of sewing with me.
Thanks everyone for watching.